Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Criterion Collection Review Series, where I'm going through every Criterion movie in my personal collection and reviewing them in spine number order, giving my thoughts and opinions on them, and for some of them, seeing them for the first time. And today's movie is very interesting and very special, as it is, I would argue, one of Guillermo del Toro's most famous and most influential films, and one of the movies that really introduced him to America. And that would be the 2001 horror classic, The Devil's Backbone. Now, same with Kronos, I don't have the individual release of that movie. I do have the box set, though, as you can see here. It's very shiny, it's very pretty. And if we open up on the inside, we have this little fold-out. And so this is the fold-out, this is the fold-out for The Devil's Backbone. You can see sort of the spine number and release and all that from here. Which, if you are curious about the spine number, they were very, very cheeky about this. And they made it spine number 666. So, good times all around. But to get started talking about The Devil's Backbone, I will say, this was actually my first time seeing this film. I'd owned this box set for a while and had been meaning to watch it. But I just never gotten around to it for whatever reason, who knows. And I was very excited to watch this movie, being a fan of Del Toro's recent works, like The Shape of Water, Pan's Labyrinth, things like that. And I have to say, you know, the movie is almost 20 years old, and it still really, really holds up. And I think a lot of that has to do with Del Toro's style and his mastery of themes, but also just the minimal but effective special effects and the great characters. But to get into the plot, the film takes place in Mexico in the tail end of the Spanish Civil War, so around 1939. And the film follows Carlos, whose father has died fighting in the war, and he's sort of forced into an orphanage in the middle of nowhere that normally houses kids whose parents have died in the war, and is run by two people that do support the freedoms that are being fought for. While Carlos is trying to sort of get settled in the orphanage and, you know, trying to deal with how off and weird things feel, he soon discovers that there is a ghost haunting the place and wandering around by the name of Santi. And part of the mystery of the film is figuring out why Santi is there and why he still haunts the place and why there's so many stories about him. At the same time, we have one of the caretakers named Jacinto, I hope I said his name right, who is planning to steal the stash of gold hidden within the orphanage, therefore jeopardizing their ability to even take care of the children. So the plot to The Devil's Backbone is fairly simple. It's a mystery film, it's a nice little horror film, but what really elevates it is Del Toro's style. As you probably know, Del Toro is well known for his production value and his way of shooting and creating spaces, and I think he got a lot of that from The Devil's Backbone, because this is a very clear showcase of what he can do, especially with a smaller budget. The Spanish Gothic style of the orphanage is striking. It's amazing how well that location can change depending on the time of day, where during the daytime it seems like a fairly standard, if old school orphanage. Nothing too frightening about it, but it just feels a little dated. But then at night, you know, these Gothic elements and structures and architecture really begin to show how horrific and creepy they can be and what they can hide, and how, you know, dark doorways during the day that were light and inviting are now dark and sinister and scary almost, especially when you know that Santi is around, and early on in the film you're not quite sure what he is, and so he could appear at any moment. I will also say the ghost effects for Santi are simply incredible, since they start with an initial striking design where he's sort of this translucent being where you can see his skin, but you can also see his bones and his organs, and so it gives him this ghost-like quality, being stuck between living and dead. At the same time, he has this broken porcelain doll look, where he has a crack in his head where the blood is flowing out constantly. That makes him feel ethereal and otherworldly and almost childish. And it makes for a very striking image that is at once scary and creepy and unnerving, and yet as you learn more about the character, becomes tragic and sympathetic and sad. I will also say that the performances in the film are simply incredible. All of the child actors do a really, really great job with the material. The kid playing Carlos is really great. He's a bit of a blank slate, but he does a great job at reactions, at acting off the other children, and I mean the other kids in general are really good. Even the smaller bit players, they feel like real children and not like somebody telling them how to perform or having awkward dialogue. And then the other caretakers like Dr. Casares, I hope I said his name right, whose actor was actually the main actor in Kronos. He does a really great job at, having this sort of, I don't want to say two-faced side to him, but he is able to really convey these themes and ideas that Del Toro is playing with, simply by being this sympathetic, wholesome caretaker that isn't afraid to really delve into his emotions and really wrestle with those and play with them. At the same time, Jacinto is an incredible villain who, I think in the hands of a lesser director, could have been very cartoonish and over the top and unbelievable. But because Jacinto is sort of this vessel for the ideals of fascism, a lot of his actions don't come off as far-fetched, but rather a logical conclusion for the type of person he is and the way that he feels about things and responds to things. So while you're watching him do these crazy, heinous things and be just an evil bastard, you understand where he's coming from. Not enough to necessarily excuse his actions or to be entirely sympathetic, but his reasoning and his thought process makes sense and is tragically very common for people who are pulled into the fascist ideology. And it's simply incredible to watch. Del Toro is a master of meshing tones, and The Devil's Backbone really gets a handle on that, where it is a film that is its tone and its style and its characters are inspired directly by its themes. The film itself is a childhood ghost story that really understands the way that reality affects how we perceive things and the context with which we tell our stories. The iconic unexploded bomb in the middle of the orphanage courtyard is a very obvious metaphor for the ways that reality and trauma can infect and force us to lose our childhood innocence. But it works since the film often takes the perspective of the children. So this unexploded bomb feels massive and almost incomprehensible and tragic in a way that only a child can really understand and represent. I'll also say Del Toro does an amazing job of meshing together childlike wonderment and fantasy and horror with actual trauma and gore and horror in a way that never feels off-putting or like it doesn't fit with the film. Del Toro somehow meshes these tones and styles together in a way that most directors cannot handle. I think the reason for that is that these conflicting tones inform each other, where the childlike innocence and the traumatic horrors of war are meant to clash, and they do inform each other because we are seeing things from a child's perspective, so the war elements are just as horrific and insane and traumatic and disturbing. A lot of the film's depth comes specifically from how children process trauma and how they work through it, be it ghost stories, be it exaggeration, be it latching onto fascist ideology where they feel safe by it. And this trauma is further explored through the adults who have the responsibility of trying to keep these children safe from some of the most horrific things to happen in their lifetime. And it's just a fascinating balance that the movie has to find while also exploring this ghost story that is informed by this trauma. The film is also informed by history, with the Spanish Civil War serving as a very important and looming backdrop to the themes and ideas of the film. It's a horror film about perspective and how community and changing your perspective can begin to heal the world, or at least you're within your own community. Santi himself is only scary when we don't know who he is or what he is about or why he's there. But once we discover the mystery and we uncover it, we now feel sympathy for Santi. We understand where he's coming from, and we can begin to empathize and relate to him and understand that he isn't really a horror. He's just a lost, scared kid at the end of the day. Similarly, ghosts of our past are scary, past trauma and atrocities and wars and just these large, looming ethical concepts out there are very hard to reconcile with. But we can't begin to heal and begin to understand them unless we confront them and do our effort to understand them, which again goes against the fascist ideologies that Del Toro is really taking to task in this film. The ending itself is bittersweet, with the children wandering out into the desert by themselves, their innocence ripped out of them by the events of the film. But they do still have each other. They still have their community that can carry them through anything, seemingly. I mean, that's what got them through the entirety of this movie, was by sticking together. And this is sort of the point I've been brushing up with, but I will say Del Toro is a master of political filmmaking, of making movies that have a very clear ideology about life and how people should treat each other. Specifically, he's anti-fascist, very, very clearly anti-fascist, and is a person that always empowers the downtrodden or the misunderstood, the outcasts of society, understanding that they have the greatest capacity for empathy and sympathy and for just creating a better world for everyone. Through the character of Jacinto, the film directly confronts fascism by having this character that embodies fascist ideologies and how it can invade a person and therefore invade a community. How tempting it can be, how understandable it can be, and yet how isolating and powerless it can feel and can ultimately be. And while he is the villain of the film and he does have some power, the film is quick to undermine him and to convey that fascists are people that want power but can never truly have it. And the only way that they have power is through enforcing it and brainwashing people into believing they have power. But when challenged, they lose that power instantly, especially when confronted by a strong community that's full of bonds that cannot be broken by any conflicting ideologies that try to, seduce them into doing horrible, heinous things. And these themes and the way that history informs them and the way it mixes horror and childlike dream logic and a war film is what makes The Devil's Backbone such an incredible, important, and special film. It's something that can be scary and yet dreamlike and intelligent and informed and just strong and passionate. It is a film made with a lot of love and care, which you can see in the production design alone, but it just really shows Del Toro's mastery at being a filmmaker and making just a damn good movie that at once can be a crowd pleaser, that can really entertain, but yet make you think and really confront these themes and ideologies and ideas that many other filmmakers have struggled to deal with in the past. So as you can obviously tell, I'm a huge fan of this movie and really, really love it, and I can't wait to watch it again. And while the movie is worth owning on its own, either in this box set or in its own release, the special features truly make this a Criterion release. There are an insane amount of interviews and behind-the-scenes special features, where if you want to know about any aspect of the production and how Guillermo del Toro feels about it, or anybody, you will have it here. You will be able to see everything from the special effects to the storyboarding to production design, acting, the works. It's simply incredible. This also gives you the benefit of seeing Del Toro's commentary and hearing him talk about film. Well, where Del Toro is on the same level as like a Martin Scorsese, where he's so passionate and knowledgeable on film that it's simply infectious listening to him talk about it and get nerdy about it and just really get excited, which is what makes his commentary track so legendary and so much fun to listen to. There's also a really great video essay on the Spanish Civil War, giving the historical context for the war while also connecting certain events in the war to plot points in the movie and certain characters, which for me, who I never really received a formal education on the Spanish Civil War, a lot of my education focused on Europe and America because we suck, but it was great to get that context to further explain and show how intelligently crafted this film is. And on top of everything else, you get the booklet, which, while if you get the normal release, it won't look like this, you will get the same special booklet in here, or the essay, if I can find it. So first you get an essay written by Mark Kermode, where he intelligently uses Del Toro's own quotes and critics' own opinions of the film to sort of contextualize the production of it and the history of The Devil's Backbone. making for a really fascinating read. And at the same time, you also get a lot of these production design drawings and notes, which not only show like how the film was set to look, but also convey what Del Toro's vision was for the film, with these little notes that are really fun to read. You also get some storyboards for some of the more iconic sequences in the film, which I don't think I mentioned that enough. A lot of these horror sequences are really, really fantastic and are really well done, very fun, and yet also very creepy and unnerving. I mean, Del Toro is just a master of horror, and again, it really shows here. But yeah, The Devil's Backbone. Well, I mean, there's not a lot else you can say. It's a Del Toro classic. It's one of his seminal works. It's the film I would argue really made him a name in America, this and Pan's Labyrinth. And it's a movie that still holds up almost 20 years later. It's a film that is so strong in its themes and ideas and the way it presents them and in its style and ideology that I think it's a movie that will stand for a long time and will be such a rewarding film to go back and watch over and over again, and I can't wait to do that. But either way, thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, please like it. If you want more people to see it, please share it. Also, please comment below what you think of The Devil's Backbone or Guillermo del Toro. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And be sure to subscribe, where next time we're going to be looking at one of the most influential comedies coming out of France in the 70s, and yet a film that I'm not entirely sure it holds up, but we'll have that discussion, and that will be La Cage aux Folles, or you might know the American remake, The Birdcage. But either way, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.